Welcome to the first ever episode of the Samong Outdoors Podcast, brought to you by Vortex Optics. This is something that Nate and I have been thinking about for probably 2 years now.
I'm talking about for probably a year.
Before we go any further, I guess if you're new here, we're going to introduce ourselves. So I'm Samong Yang, and I'm one of the co-hosts for this podcast. But if you're brand new, this is actually a secondary platform to me. Many of you, most of you, maybe all of you, might know me from my primary YouTube channel, the Samong Outdoors YouTube channel, where I post a lot of my videos about hunting, fishing, gear reviews, and occasionally the random vlog. And that channel in itself has really driven me to where I am today. And the reason why we're starting this podcast is because the podcast allows for a different angle into looking at what goes on a hunt or fishing, or in this case, kind of behind the scenes as to what you guys see all around here. So we're super excited. So we are here at Nate's shop. And so again, my name's Samong Yang, joined by...
I'm Nate Cutshall.
And Nate and I, we're going to co-host this podcast, and for the vast majority of our podcast, it's going to be just the two of us. Yeah. Occasionally, when we get lucky, we will have some guests on here. But the purpose, why are we starting this? I touched on it briefly, but the point of this is I feel like there's a lot of merit to being able to simply tell a story in its entirety versus just nitpicking what's being filmed on a hunt or a fishing trip and then only showing people what I film, because the thing and the reality of it is I don't always capture the moments that matter or happen real time, but then you can always reflect on those things and give a more in-depth story about it. So that's kind of where the podcast comes into play, along with my main YouTube channel, where I only film and I can only showcase what I actually film right then and there on the spot. The truth is, we don't really know where this podcast is going. We have an idea, we just want to do it, and that's what we're doing.
And for those of you that have came from the YouTube channel, we met a ton of you guys this last winter at the Sportsman Show that we may have talked about this podcast for longer than we should have before we launched it. And that was part of it. We just wanted to make sure that we did it right. We did it the best we could. And we just kind of have to end up jumping in the water and going for it.
Absolutely. So I don't know where you guys are joining us from, but in case you don't know, this podcast has two primary platforms. We have a video platform on YouTube, the Samong Outdoors Podcast YouTube channel. But if you don't want to watch, or you're on a drive and you literally cannot visually consume this content, you can listen to this podcast on anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whatever you want to do. But the advantage of having a visual aspect here is sometimes Nate and I, we're going to talk about a certain topic or a certain hunt where we're going to have a visual prop, or for example, like a Euro deadhead over here where we're going to talk about. So having that visual can help, I guess, elevate the story so that you guys can see exactly what we're talking about instead of having to use your imagination. And so that's the reason why it's taken so long, because Nate and I, we were like, well, we can just do a bunch of podcasts and just film the audio, and we can film it or we can record it anywhere we want. But I was telling Nate, I was like, if I'm going to do a podcast, I want to do it to the best of my ability. And again, as I have previously mentioned, my bread and butter is with videography. And I was like, I am not starting a podcast unless we have the video aspect alongside the audio.
Which brings out a whole different component, because audio podcast, because there's no visual, you can set it up anywhere. You could be doing it in a closet, kitchen, on a road trip, at a campground. It doesn't really matter.
Yep.
But as soon as you bring in that video, we have got a lot more infrastructure behind, which you kind of got to get in line.
To add on to that, if you guys are watching on YouTube, you might be like, wow, they're in a legitimate studio. And that's exactly what Nate's talking about. We have spent the last year and a half, maybe just a little over a year, building out this podcast studio, which the podcast studio is here at Nate's house. Nate has his own house, but alongside his house, he has this beautiful shop. And he was kind enough to host this podcast studio, as well as not just the studio itself, but kind of just the shop in general. It's a legitimate shop where we're going to do a lot of gear reviews here, or we're going to do a podcast studio here. And sometimes we even have people over because they want to crash the night here on a hunt.
No, it's really a blessing. I mean, it's something I've dreamed of for a long time. I didn't necessarily think it was something that was achievable at a younger age, like I've gotten, which my wife and I are really blessed about. But one cool thing about having a shop, and I live up north of Spokane, is I'm kind of building it into this dream area where we've got the video aspect for the podcast and for gear reviews and stuff with Samong's channel. And then also, what you see here is a nicely put together frame of a podcast studio, but behind the cameras, it's a messy shop that's in the middle of getting built with sawdust and tools everywhere, which is kind of how I like it. But also, I just want to have a place where people can come and process meat, hang deer, have a fire, share stories, especially during hunting season. Have it kind of be a place where people just get to spend some time.
In a few years, when Nate and I, we look back when we first started this podcast, hopefully we look back and we say, man, we come a long way and the shop looks way cleaner now. So right now, everything's a work in progress. Even the studio itself is a work in progress. Yeah. It's always changing. As Nate and I, we've just done, we're like putting down Euros, replacing mounts and stuff like that. So with all of that said, we don't want to bore you guys with that. Again, we're really here to have a good time, but also share the stories and mistakes and successes that we have had in the past. As long with that, we have some games that we want to play. So
gotta have games.
We gotta have games, man. A lot of these podcasts are just way too serious. We're here to have a good time. So we're gonna play some games. So in the future podcasts, you can expect 2 games that we have thought of so far, and we're gonna call them Fast Facts, where the both of us or guests, including, we're just gonna throw out some random facts about whatever, primarily sticking to hunting, fishing, survival, outdoor, or something gear related. And the other one is?
The other one's called Trivia Duel. So this is one we kind of throw around a couple ideas of keeping score or having punishments or what have you. But I think we're just going to stick to right now a weekly. I've got a trivia question for Samong. He'll have one for me, and it'll be a little bit educational. Hopefully something that the other one doesn't know right off the bat. Fun, but hopefully a little tidbit of knowledge that you can have in the back of your mind.
Exactly. So we're going to have a good time. With that said, we're going to kick things off with Fast Facts.
Perfect.
Nate, let's start with you. What's a fast fact that you got for us?
Well, I guess in the spirit of an introductory podcast where we're going to be talking a little bit about who we are and where we come from, and the transparency of this nice-looking podcast studio in the middle of a dirty shop. My fast fact is that about 10 inches behind me, just on the other side of this wall, there's about a dozen chickens. That's where we have our chicken coop. That's where we get our eggs from, and that's the fact I got for you.
You're rich. You get eggs for free.
Man, you're not kidding. Nowadays, it is a. I'm feeling bad for people that are trying to get into chickens this year.
I was literally yesterday. I was like, I should probably start raising chickens again. Get back to the roots.
Crazy.
So yes, Nate does have a beautiful flock of chickens right outside the shop here. My fast fact.
Let's hear it.
Is magiricophobia is the extreme fear of cooking, and the people with this condition worry about making mistakes that could be embarrassing or harm others. I don't think I would call it a phobia for me, but it's definitely something that I think about every time I cook something and I hand it to people.
Oh, for sure.
It makes you nervous. I'm like, I don't know what this person thinks of this food. And so people, a little bit of background, people will always say, oh man, you cook such amazing food on your videos. I'm like, well, how a food looks and how a food tastes is not the same thing. And
but
so like,
they are good though.
They are, we'll see.
Good.
I'd like to say that they're good, but every time, it doesn't matter how well of a job I think I've done, I'm always nervous to like have people taste my food. Especially when it's something out of the norm, like something that's not culturally normal. For example, like
when you made me the stew like this last late season. Yeah, try.
Like when I hand people like stomach, which I think for me growing up in home culture, like tripe is very normal, right? But when I go and hand that to somebody who's like never had tripe before, and tripe is very foreign, it's a little nerve-wracking because I'm like, I don't know if I'm about to poison this guy or what he's gonna think about it, if he thinks I'm weird. But that's
one of those is true, but we'll let you decide which one.
But that's my little fast fact is maguricophobia. I wouldn't call it a phobia for me, but it's definitely something that's always in the back of my mind whenever I cook and I have to serve other people that food.
I wonder if they just stick to like box noodles then. Like, what do you do if you have maguricophobia? Order takeout?
They
That way you didn't cook
probably
it?
have feared that they cooked the noodles wrong.
Oh, that would suck.
But there you go. So Nate has chickens. Maguricophobia is the fear of cooking. Hopefully that's something that you guys didn't know and found intriguing. So with that said, as an introductory podcast with a little bit of background between us, we're going to get into just who we are and where we come from and how we ended up in this place in the first place. So we're going to start with Nate over here.
Oh, man. So I grew up not hunting, actually. Well, I started hunting when I was 11 or 12, but that was at the same time that my dad started hunting. So my dad was kind of the adult onset hunter. We went through hunter's ed together, my brother, my dad, and I. And we got into mostly small game, turkey, grouse hunting, which, disclaimer, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Small game hunting is a blast. It's a great thing to get into as a new hunter, especially with adult hunters with kids. It's just a great easygoing hunt. And I really only turkey hunted and grouse hunted and a little bit of upland hunting from 11 or 12 up until pretty much when I was done with college. I got busy I was in college for 4 or 5 years. Hunting kind of dropped off a bit just because I didn't have the time. And then coming out of college in 2019 was when I jumped back into the hunting kind of area and got more into big game. So that's kind of just a very brief background on where I came from with hunting. Outside of hunting, I have a beautiful family. I have a wife and a new little daughter from this last September. We live up here north of Spokane. It's like I mentioned earlier with this podcast studio. We're blessed to have a house with a little bit of land and a property, and it's been just kind of a dream come true in that aspect. And I'm sure Samong and I will elaborate a little bit more on when we met and how that kind of came to be. But that's who I am. Outside, this is not hunting and content creation and photography is not my full-time job yet. Although I do a lot of photography in the hunting industry outside of work, day to day, I work as a trauma nurse in the ICU here at the trauma center in Spokane. And my wife's at work, and so I'm a part-time stay-at-home dad too when I'm not working, and a part-time photographer and hunter and all the stuff. So it's great. It's a busy life, but it's been a blessing and really something.
So you've clearly already have a very decorated life. And how old are you?
I'm 26.
26.
So almost 27, but that's exactly what I was saying. Like, this is really, I mean, not to take away and pat my own back, but like, it's been a lot of hard work and dedicated savings and things like that. As you know, you don't fall onto, something like this, but we're just really blessed to be able to find ourselves in this situation in life with a supportive family, and it's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. A little brief background about me. So I come from a Hmong family, and my parents are actually refugees from the secret war in Vietnam. And so I'm first generation here in the U.S. So my parents, they fled from essentially Laos, but really they came over from Thailand after they fled the war. And they came here to Spokane, Washington, and they came here in the mid-'80s. I was born in 97, so I'm 27 at the time of this recording. So Nate and I are pretty much same age. And by the time I was born, that's already like a little bit over a decade of my dad and my parents and my uncle settling down here in Spokane. So a decade in a place, you've kind of got life figured out. You kind of have a daily routine. So when I was born in 1997, hunting, fishing, camping, everything about that stuff around the Spokane area, I was born right into. So there was no giant curve or giant jumping step for me. It was part of life as far as I can remember. And so at the age of like 3 or 4, my dad took me on my first hunt here in north central Washington, grouse hunting. And so kind of like you, I started small game hunting. But very quickly, like that transitioned over to starting getting drug along with deer hunts,
Mm.
and then eventually elk as I got older. So I got my hunter's ed in 2009, and my dad bought me a 17 HMR, and we started going grouse hunting. And then from there, it just kind of spiraled my hunting love and passion into what it is today. But then in 2011, this is where my love of filming came into play because in 2011, Christmas of 2011, one of my brother-in-laws, he got me a little iPad or iPod Touch because technology at that time wasn't anywhere what we have today. So an iPod Touch where you can record stuff and take photos at the tip of your fingers was the best thing that has ever happened to me.
My brother had one of those, and I was so jealous because it had the camera on it.
Yeah, and so at that time, like you, I had chickens, like backyard chickens just like this. And I just really found filming very intriguing. So every time I would go to the chicken coop, I would start filming my chickens, as weird as that sounds. And I would just like kind of document my chickens because we would raise and hatch chicks ourselves. So we would breed them, and then the hen would incubate the eggs, and then they would hatch. And then I would just have this constant progress of filming them starting at day one, what they look like a month later, what they look like 3 months later, and then 5 months later they get killed because we ate them.
Mm-hmm.
And then so it's like this constant just like love of filming, and then naturally, because I was already hunting and fishing at that time, as hunting season rolled around, it naturally trickled into that. My filming naturally trickled into that. Granted, what I filmed back then was not good stuff. It was like the most terrible quality that you can probably find on the internet today. Granted, like that channel I had back then, it's gone. I deleted it. I regret deleting stuff just because I want to go back and just see like what life was like back then, but I don't have it anymore because I just deleted the channel. But that's a brief background of where I come from. But then as of today, as we record this podcast, this is what I do full time. So I'm a full-time content creator, but it's only possible because of amazing business partner like Vortex behind me over here who have supported me along the way. But this was really never anything that was supposed to work out the way it did. It just was a coincidence, and all the stars just lined up for me to have it work the way it did. So in 2015, that's when I went to college. So I went to Eastern Washington University. And right around 2015 is when I started brainstorming about this Samong Outdoors YouTube channel that is live right now. That's my main channel today. And so throughout college, I would go to school, and on the time off, I would fish or I would go hunting. And then in 2016, this is when I actually started this YouTube channel that I still film today. And so it took me 5 years to get my undergrad because I was actually primarily at first a computer science major. I went 1 full year into that. I figured this is not what I want to do. I don't want to sit in front of a computer, and this is
Little did you know that half your life would be sitting in front of a
I
computer.
still sit in front of the computer, just doing something a little bit different. But anyway, my first 2 years so 2015, 2016, those were my general requirements because at that time I was still kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, even though I had a strong leaning towards computer science. Third year, which is when you actually had to declare a major, I said I'm going to do computer science. So I went a full year in computer science, did not enjoy it, and I just knew this is not my calling. And then the fourth year, I switched over to biology for one quarter because my mom did not agree with me being a business major. She was like, everybody you know about business major has failed. Their businesses have failed. You're gonna follow their footsteps. It's not gonna work out. So, I'm not gonna say I'm the best child. So I was like, you know what? Like I know I'm not gonna survive 8 more years more of medical school. Like school is not my thing, right? And so I did 1 quarter of biology, and I told my mom, like, all right, I'm gonna do a biology major. The next quarter, behind her back, I went to my advisor and I said, I'm gonna switch my major. And he's like, all right, what are you gonna switch to? I said, I'm gonna switch to marketing, business marketing. He's like, all right, cool. Because at that time, again, I wasn't anywhere far into any major besides computer science 1 year in. And then kind of I went with it, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. Like business marketing is what I want to do. And because at the same time that I'm doing this stuff, like I'm filming and doing hunting and fishing stuff on the side that I have time. So like I kind of had a general idea of like if this could work, like it'd be awesome. But at that time it was so far-fetched. I was like, there's no way it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
A year into my marketing thing, I'm essentially a senior now, and that's when I tell my mom, like, just to let you know, I've been a business major for like a year, and it's too late to switch now because I'm graduating next year, and so my mom's like, okay, whatever. He's like, you can't change it at that point because I'm gonna graduate the next year, and so senior year, which is 2020 at this point, we go through it. And obviously, everybody knows the pandemic hits, and so all of my schooling switches to online, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is what I want to do anyway. And then the beautiful state of Washington shuts down hunting, shuts down fishing. So we're just cooped up at home. And I'm like, dude, this sucks. I got to go to school online. I can't do anything because everything's shut down. Fast forward to June, I graduate, right? I graduate in 2020, peak COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs, the world is still essentially shut down. I cannot go and find a job. Nobody can find a job at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, whatever. I'm just going to go and film because hunting and fishing at that time had reopened. And so I took 2020 off, just hunting hard 2020. Had probably one of my least successful seasons of my career. But I was like, this is so cool because at that time, people were starting to trickle in. The channel starting to gain momentum. And 2021 rolls around, the world's slowly reopening. And I said, I'm just going to do this again. Took 2021 off, went full in.
Mm-hmm.
And then right as 2022 began, I was like, I think I could do this full time.
Yeah.
I wasn't making money, but I was scraping enough by to actually call it a job and actually survive.
Well, I remember that was one of the first things that because our first hunt together was in May of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And by our second hunt together, we were doing a week in the backcountry. And you were like, man, if I can get the one more year under my belt, if it goes well in this next year, like we're doing this. I'm doing this full time.
I remember having that conversation with you, which leads us to the next point, how we met.
Yeah.
So before you and I met, we actually met through a mutual buddy of ours, Steve,
Mm-hmm.
Northwest Outdoor Adventures. And Steve lives in the Valley. And Steve actually reached out to me right around, I think, 2021, winter of 2021. So this is when COVID is still... It's still up there. Like news are still talking about COVID, and COVID's not going anywhere at this point. And he hits me up like after hunting season's over, and he hits me up on Instagram. He's like, "Hey man, I think you and I kind of live around the same area. We should link up sometime." And at this point, I had already seen some of Steve's stuff on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Steve, if you don't know Steve, Steve has his own little YouTube channel, Northwest Outdoor Adventures, as well as his Instagram page.
Mm-hmm.
And so he reached out, and he's like, "Hey, we should go hunt, or we should go fishing at that time." And I'm like, yeah, that's cool because at that time I was still so small. So like I didn't really get people hitting me up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when somebody hits you up, it's like, oh, okay, cool. We make a plan, like we're going to go fish one of Steve's spots. And the week before or like a couple days before we go, he calls me up again. He's like, hey man, I think I've got COVID. And I don't know yet because my test results have not come back. And I just don't want to risk anything. So I don't want to flake out on you, but I just think that this is best that we kind of wait it out to see what I have. And so I'm like, all right, that's cool. So my first impressions of Steve was like, oh, this guy actually kind of cares about me, even though we've never met. And sure enough, a few days later, he hits me up. He's like, yeah, my test results came back. I have COVID. And so the first thing was like, oh, okay, so this guy's, he's not just there for himself. He actually cares about me. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. Like, I hope you recover well, and we'll reschedule. Fast forward a month or two, he recovers. We go out, and we just absolutely slay the fish, and we just have a good time. And so this is now, I might have my years. This was 2020 when Steven first met.
Oh, okay.
So January of 2021 was when we went fishing, and then just because you're out there and you're fishing together, Steve's like, hey man, what do you do in the spring? You know, you're kind of having small talk about what you do in daily life. And I was like, well, in the spring, I usually just go turkey hunting, and I'm usually done within the first 3 days, and I wish I had more tags. And Steve's like, well, great, I could use your help. And so I'm like, cool, let's go turkey hunt. Fast forward, Steve and I, we go hunting for like a day or two, and then he hits me up. He's like, hey, man, I have one of my friends. He kind of wants to come up and meet us. Do you mind? And I'm like, I don't care. Like, if he wants to come up, like, feel free. And that friend happened to be...
That was me.
That was you.
Yeah.
So here you come up rolling with your brand new Toyota Tacoma at that time. And I'm like, dang, dude. And at that point, I remember seeing his truck because
This was like the week after I got that truck too.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking, I'm like, I'm here with Steve. Steve's driving a truck. This guy that I just met is driving a truck. I'm over here driving a Toyota Camry. What am I doing?
And we were thinking, this guy's driving a Toyota Camry out here. What's he doing?
Yeah, so that's how we met. So the first time we actually formally met was on a turkey hunt with Steve. Steve ended up killing a bird 2 days in or something like that because you were bow hunting at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we met, and then we kind of just clicked off, and then fast forward 5 months later, Nate and I, we found ourselves in the high country of Washington after we killed your bear.
Yeah. So, I had, and this was my second year of big game hunting, and so I had told Samong during the spring hunt that, hey, I'm really trying to go hunt this year, and I really want to kill a bear, and I've also got this idea in the back of my mind since the year prior of doing this backcountry hunt, which to me it was a completely foreign concept. I actually, kind of a little background of it, was at work taking care of this patient who had a big heart surgery, and how it goes with people that hunt. It kind of came up, and he was a big hunter, and he was like, "Man, have you ever done high buck hunt in Washington?" And I was like, "No, what is this?" And he kind of told me about it throughout the night. And so I work night shift, so I'm going in his room at like 2 a.m. It's like, so what do you think about this area? What do you think about this? And it got me really excited. And so that kind of brewed in my mind. We went on a fall bear hunt together where I killed my first bear. And then during that hunt, I told Samong, I'm like, hey, and a couple weeks here, like September 15th to 25th, Washington's got this 10-day high buck hunt season, and I'm thinking about doing my first backcountry hunt. What do you think? Samong was like, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Prior to that, like I've known about that hunt. I've just never gone. Like I've never done it because nobody wants to go, because you always hear about that stuff because it's a daunting hunt, which it is. And so when you brought it up, I was like, oh, there's a partner that I can have for this hunt. Yeah. And so when you said it, I was like, say less.
Yeah. And so we kind of found ourselves, and was that your first quote unquote backcountry style hunt?
I would say true backcountry hunt.
Yeah.
That was the first true backpack where you're remote. There's no roads nearby. Yeah.
And so we both more or less went into it having no idea what to expect. Like you said, kind of a daunting hunt, really low success rates, big country, foreign country to both of us. It was, we were lucky to be successful on that hunt, but even more than that, we kind of opened this door to everything that comes along with the backcountry hunting, kind of pushing yourselves and being remote and going for, multiple days on end, a week on end, and kind of getting to know each other really throughout that week and kind of what each other's made of. And it was really a really cool experience.
Yeah. I think hunts like that where they really push you, because I remember on that hunt, there were multiple times where I cannot do this hunt. I feel like my body was giving out because I've hunted my whole life, but I've never done anything to that level, right? Mm-hmm. And many times throughout the hunt, I was like, I'm never doing this hunt again. This hunt's just going to kill me. And so luckily on that hunt, just having the background of what I know prior to doing that high buck hunt, you at least have a baseline of where to start, how to glass, what to look for, what a mule deer looks like, etc. And so actually on the first night that we sat there, I spotted up a bachelor group of bucks like 2 miles away. Still don't, to this day, I don't know how I spotted them, but I did. And long story short, this hunt is live on my YouTube channel, Samong Outdoors. It's probably one of my favorite hunts looking back at it. And this is where we took the buck that's sitting right next to Nate right here. That's Nate's first ever mule deer. That's the one we shot in the high country. And so where are we going with the high country? It leads us to the story that we want to talk about on this podcast, which is the high buck hunt that happens the following year of our first high buck hunt.
Which,
we took that buck.
Spoiler alert, you thinking you were not ever going to do this hunt again. We did again the next year and went way farther and way deeper.
Yes. So the first high country hunt that Nate and I did was in 2021. 2022 comes around. Well, after we shot that guy, we're doing this hunt again.
Oh,
because on that hunt,
the three of us being Steve, who joined us.
Steve joined us
3 days or 4 days into
after
the hunt.
So we packed out your buck back to the truck. Steve shows up. He hikes back in with us.
Mm-hmm.
We go back to the same spot because the reason why is because we had a bachelor group of bucks and there was another legal deer with that group of deer other than the one you killed. And so I was like, well, we know there's a legal deer here. Let's try to go back and kill this one. We get back in there, and on Nate's carcass of this deer is one of the biggest black bears I have ever seen, just eating at this deer carcass. And I remember when we were sitting there, I think Steve was the first one to see it. So he's like, oh my, I remember he said something vulgar. He was like, holy something. And then he's like, what is that? And I'm looking up. I'm like, oh, maybe it's a deer. And we all throw the binos up, and it's like the biggest black bear I have ever seen. And it's a chocolate bear too.
Yeah.
Just like going to town on this bear. And we're all looking at this bear. Do you have a tag? Nate's like, I don't have a tag. I'm looking at Steve. It's like, Steve, did you buy a tag? We told you to buy a tag in town. Steve's like, I don't have a tag. And I'm like, I don't have a tag.
And prior to this hunt, Jeff over at PN Wild was on the phone with Samong and I like, you guys better get your tags in town before you go up to this hunt because there's bears up there. And we're like, nah, like, I don't think so. We've already shot our bear this year. Like, we don't want to pick up a second tag.
We regretted it.
Big time.
Very, very short and blunt. We regretted it. I texted Jeff the next day. I'm like, dude, you're not going to believe this. He's like, you went back and pulled a double on a deer? I'm like, no. We saw the biggest bear of our life, and we didn't have a tag. Dude, Jeff, like, I could cry right now, brother. And I'm like, you got me, Jeff. But that's kind of the catalyst for why we did it the next year, because I'm like, oh, my goodness, there's deer here. We were successful first year. There's giant bears in the high country. And so 2022, like, we were eager. The moment 2021's hunting season was over, Nate and I remember we were on Onyx just scouting, like, hey, where do we want to go next? What's the best way we can access this spot? If we go in here, what tent are we bringing? What gear are we bringing? How can we dial in our gear better? What can we shave? And what do we need? What do we not need? We went to this deep rabbit hole of just prepping for this high country deer hunt because we were expecting to get just our butts kicked again. 2022 rolls around. We find a spot. The first thing we do is 2,000 vertical feet. And I'm thinking when we first rolled up to the trailhead, I'm looking and I was like, we're going to die. And so long story short, we kind of make our way up there, and we get to the top. I'm like, dude, this is not that bad. Like, I thought we were going to get wrecked.
Yeah.
But I think part of that just comes from muscle memory.
Yeah, we were a lot more prepared. We had done more intense hunting, more hunting in general. By this time, you were full swing doing this full time.
Yep.
And I took my conditioning a bit more serious. And we got up the first kind of push on that hunt in a couple hours. And we're like, holy cow, we feel great. Let's keep going.
Yeah, so we get up there, and to get into the story, this was a really hard hunt. The first night we were in there, we were overlooking this giant basin. We were up on the saddle and just like glassing this other hillside or mountainside, and we just were not picking out deer. We were like, we don't know. And at the same time, again, this is our second year doing it, so we're not really experienced. Like, we don't really know if there are deer there. We're just not picking them out, or if there's simply no deer there. And at last, like, I remember I got a glimpse of a deer just moving through the trees, but I was only glassing with my binos, and my pack was like, I don't know, 50 yards behind me with my spotter.
And so, it was like 12 or 1,300 yards to the other side that we were glassing. It was really far.
And so I remember I was like, oh, there's a deer with my binos. I throw the binos down, and because you were not with me,
I was up glassing the other side.
Yeah, and so I'm running back to go grab a spotter, also to grab you, and by the time I get back, the deer's gone. And the deer had vanished into this really small strip of brush. And I'm like, the deer's got to come out at some point. Well, we stay there all night, never see the deer. Glass the next morning, don't see any deer. And so we're kind of just looking at each other, and we're like, okay, well, do we stay here, or do we keep going to the basin that we want to get to? Because we had a destination that we wanted to get to. We were just having these small pit stops along the way. And so we're like, all right, well, let's just pack up and just keep going. So we make another jaunt. And I remember I was dying on this portion because we essentially summited one of the highest peaks in this area with all of our gear, and this was like another 3.5 miles on top of where we had just camped the night before. So 3.5 miles, peaking a mountain, and then dropping to the backside, and then making another basin over. That's where we ended up, and this is where we call SOS Basin.
Yeah.
So Up to this point, we have not seen a single deer or a single bear other than one that I got a glimpse of.
Mhm.
And I remember we were walking down this super steep, scaly saddle. Like either side of
It
it,
was basically this knife edge saddle with shale where we had to be extremely careful about our steps.
because I remember before we got to that saddle and we were looking at it from a distance, we were like, I don't even know if we can go over there. I
Mhm.
remember we contemplated that. We are like, I don't know even if we get over there, how do we get back?
Mhm.
You know, it was really that type of treacherous terrain that we were dealing with. So we get over there, and there's this little flat spot, and I look down there, and we found a brass, right?
No, it was an empty little plastic bottle of Captain Morgan.
Okay, so we found that, and we're like, okay, somebody's been here before.
We're like, you're kidding me.
Okay, so we're in here in the middle of nowhere, and we just found that.
Which, thinking back, it kind of makes sense that that's where it was because it was the only like semi little flat spot,
Yeah,
like
And
4 feet in diameter.
and it was
in this
nice
whole
because
area.
it was on top of the saddle cliff where you can look into the basin that we want to get to.
Mhm.
I remember I stood there and I told Nate, I was like, we are not camping here.
Yeah.
Like, this is dangerous to camp up here. Like, if you fall off, like, you're done. Because, again, it's right on the cliff of, like, a 100-foot drop or something like that. And so I'm like, well, if we can really get down there, because we glassed down at the bottom, we saw some water, like a little runoff, or like, we need water.
Mhm.
If we can get down there safely, we can camp down there. We don't have to worry about water. We can just focus on hunting. Long story short, we kind of skedaddle our way down there. I mean, it was steep, and we were kind of just maneuvering down along this cliff when we get down there, and got plenty of water. We set up our tents, and then we started glassing. So it took us essentially all day to get in there. So by the time we got ready, sun was already starting to set,
Mhm.
which we were like, oh, this is perfect glassing time.
Yeah.
So we go up to this little rock. I remember you were sitting like 20 yards to my right. You were on your own rock. I was on my own rock, and I'm glassing, and deer start blowing below us. And I'm like, okay, great. There goes all the deer. And so I come over to you because we hear the deer, and we're just glassing there. And we're glassing a giant burn. Like, this is probably like a 5-year-old burn, if I remember right.
Mhm.
And I'm glassing, and I'm glassing. And the thing about glassing burns is your gaps are so small. There's a lot of dead trees blocking your way. And I just remember I glassed up on the spine, see a black dot, and I'm like, oh, there's a moose. And just a giant black blob. And so I throw my binos down, and I'm like, Nate, I think there's a moose over there. I glass back up. The thing is gone. And I'm like trying to tell Nate, like, this is where I saw it. But at the same time, I didn't know where I saw it because when you look at something through the binos and then you put your binos down, everything looks the same. All the burns look the same. All the trees look the same.
Yeah.
The thing's just gone. And at this point, I'm like, Nate probably thinks I'm lying. I said I saw a deer yesterday. We haven't seen the deer. Today, I said I see either a bear or a moose, and we haven't seen it. Nate's probably thinking this guy's just delusional at this point. And so we go back. We don't see anything else. Go back to the tents. And all night, dude, I remember I'm like, I know what I saw. I know it was something. I know for a fact I was not, like, hallucinating. The next morning, Nate's like, okay, well, I believe you. Like, you know, just trying to help the morale up. First thing we get up, we go back and we start glassing the hillside. And finally, like 20 minutes in, boom, there he is. Giant, big old jet black bear.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's him, Nate. I told you I saw something. And this thing is huge. Again, this hunt is live on our YouTube channel. You can watch it. This is a 2-part series. And this bear is about a mile away. And how this basin is set up is Nate and I were camped at the head of the basin. And so there's a long wall on our right and a long wall on our left. This bear is on the long wall to our right.
Mhm.
And he's just feeding in this small burn. But then inside the burn are these super small berry bushes, which I think are like either huckleberries or blueberries.
Yeah, it was like they were huckleberries just like on their way out, just the tiniest.
They were like the
tiny
size
little
of
berries.
like chipmunk eyes. But
Very descriptive.
yeah, but it's just like he was just grubbing away. And so I remember I'm looking at this bear, I'm like, Nate, like this thing's huge.
Well, and up to this point, we hadn't seen berries the whole hike.
No.
Like this was day 4 by the time that 4 or 5 of the morning that we saw this bear, and he was right. I mean, when you did glass him up the next morning, he was not very far
He was
from
like
where you saw him
100
the night
yards where I
before.
saw him.
So we were like, man, he's got to be just hanging out in this area because that's where there has to be a little patch of berries at.
And so I glass this bear up again, and like Nate's right next to me. I'm like, Nate, I got the bear. And Nate doesn't care. Like he's still glassing the other side of the basin. I'm like, Nate, like I got the bear. And like I could just tell like he's so nonchalant. He's like, I don't care. Like I want to look for a deer, which I totally get. And then finally I was like, Nate, I understand you want to look for a deer, but this bear you should just like look at him. Like look at him one time. And Nate looks at him one time and I remember he just turns and looks at him. He's like, dude, that thing's a tank. And I'm like, I know, that thing's huge.
He was like, this is what I've been trying to tell you for the past 10
And
minutes.
I just remember after you looked at me, like your demeanor completely changed. You're like, how do we kill this thing? And I'm like, we go up there and we go shoot it, right? And so we're looking at it. And the thing about bears, if you're new, like bears bears move a lot. But in this case, I was like, he looks so content because we left him all night and he's only moved like 100 yards. And I'm like, Nate, if we can bomb over there, we can shoot him really close. Just kind of, because there's a lot of these small little rolling hills. We can kind of use these divots as like a blockage.
It was one big basin which we were hunting, but within this basin, there was kind of these little finger ridges,
Like
which
little
we're
guts.
thinking we could, almost shoot just across one gut. And if we could get in position, it would be like under 200 yards.
Yeah. Long story short, we leave our tents. We just take our day gear and we start bombing over. Like this is like a mile hike to get over there. And so we get over there and long story short, like about 300 yards away, Nate's like, dude, I got him. Because once you start stalking in, you lose visual to that angle because you can't see past the trees anymore. So we get over there, we're creeping up. Nate's like, dude, he's right there. Like he's there. And in my head, I'm like, I'm about to smoke the biggest bear of my life. Like I'm stoked for this. We get up there and it is so thick. There's so many dead trees in the way. And the gaps, even at 200 yards, it's so slim pickings. And I remember I just told Nate, I was like, Nate was like, okay, well, do we just get in a position where we can shoot him right now? I'm like, let's just sit here. And when he walks onto a lane, we'll shoot him. Like, we want him to do the moving, not us. And so I get prone 170 yards, right? Nate's on the camera. And finally, this bear walks onto the small gap. And I just remember, like, this thing's just a blob in my scope. And I just see his arm, his left arm, because he's facing to the left. And I'm like, right behind the arm. Chip shot, 170 yards. This is a dead bear. I'm prone. I'm rock solid. I shoot. And the bear reacts kind of slow. He kind of like rolls up a little bit. And he starts running down towards us.
Straight at us.
And I'm thinking, this bear's charging us. So I get up off the ground. I rack another one in. And this bear is like full-blown running towards us. And this is all on video. And I'm just thinking in my head right now, like, Nate is defenseless. He has the camera in him. Like, I need to shoot this bear. So the second one, like, he's running so fast. My second shot goes off. And I'm not even trying to hit the bear. I'm just trying to scare this bear to divert his attention. I shoot, and he runs even faster. I rack my last round in because I have 3 in my gun. And this is where everything starts going downhill. So the bear runs down. He crosses the gut onto our ridge.
And so after your second shot, we actually lost visual of it. We could hear him down because it's really thick down in this gut because there was water. But we could hear him, but we couldn't actually see him. But we could hear him, and he was getting closer.
Yeah.
And we were like, dude, you've got 1 round left.
So to paint a picture better, imagine like you have 2 parallel ridges, but then as you go down those ridges, they kind of meet up at the gut, right? So it's like parallel, but it's kind of not parallel. So we're on one ridge shooting the other bear on the other ridge top. And as he's like running down towards the gut, which is in like 45 degrees towards us in a way. And he comes through the gut, and like I could just remember like hearing huffing and puffing. And I'm like, dude, he's gonna pop out right here. And again, in my head, I'm thinking, I drilled him on the first shot. Like I'm thinking that this bear's gonna die. Right? I'm just thinking that he's full of adrenaline. He's just charging us. Yeah. So in my head, I'm like, this bear's going to die. He sounds like he's breathing too hard. Well, we're kind of looking. At this point, we're both standing up. We look down, and sure enough, he pops up right under us, maybe like 100 yards, right onto the spine of the
It was
ridge.
like 71.
Yeah, right?
It was close.
He pops up. I remember, not fully. His head pops up, and his neck shows up. And I'm like, I'm looking at him, and I'm like, do I shoot again? I remember I asked you, I was like, do I shoot him again? And he's just standing there. I'm thinking, like, he's got to die. Like, I'm just waiting for this bear to roll over at this point. And he does it. He's just standing there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to send it. So I put it. This is my mistake. I should have not put it where I put it. Because, again, his neck, his head is showing, but his body's fully covered. but it's just through some small little leaves. And I'm like, I'm just going to put it right through the leaves and just punch him through his armpit again. I should have just necked him.
Mm-hmm.
I shoot, and the bear just takes off. And I'm like, where's my bullets? I look at Nate. Nate's like, dude, your ammo is still over here where we dropped our pack and our bino harness. So I'm sitting there with no round in the gun, nothing left to rechamber my rifle. So I told Nate, let's run back to our pack. We need to go grab ammo. Mistake number one, never drop your ammo that you're going to shoot out of your main rifle. Because I dropped my bino harness. I didn't even have my handgun with me.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely defenseless in that situation after my 3 rounds in my 6.5 Creed. We go back, and at this point, I'm thinking, I killed the bear. I kind of forget what you were thinking, but long story short, we kind of regroup, and Nate stand. We go back to where I shot. You stand where I shot from. I go over to where I thought the bear was standing. Don't find blood. We start gritting this bear. We do not find any blood. We don't find the bear. We don't find any fur.
We find nothing.
We find nothing.
I found where he ran when he popped up on our side of the basin at 70-something yards. I found the bush that you shot through at him, and I found his paw marks where he jumped over a log. And I mean, I was on my hands and knees, and we did not find anything.
Yeah, and to paint this story a little bit better, like we're in a big burn, so like there's deadfall everywhere, right? Like white trees. So if there's blood, like blood on white logs is extremely easy to pick out, right? Granted, we knew that bears don't bleed very well, right? And I'm shooting a relatively smaller caliber, a 6.5 Creed. But again, 170 yards with a 6.5 Creed, like that bear's as good as dead. And so, long story short, we start gritting this bear for about an hour, just kind of in the vicinity where we think he's not going to run, and we can't find this bear. So I remember I come back up to Nate, and we kind of resettle. We're looking at the footage, and we're like, I can't really tell because he kind of reacts like he got hit, but he's not reacting like he got hit. Because if I hit him where he is, or where I thought I hit him, he shouldn't be past where we've already gridded. So at this point, we decide with this amazing game plan of, hey, let's just split up a little bit, and we'll parallel each other, and we'll kind of just work towards the direction we think that this bear has gone.
Yeah.
And so when
we'll meet up after.
And then we'll meet up at the end of this route.
Yeah.
So where we are, it's kind of like a small open meadow, and I'm like, Nate, let's make sure we can always see each other at all times. And not to dog on you, but Nate was like, no, I think as long as we're within as long as we're within 100 yards of each other, I think it'll be okay, because we kind of need a split up anyway, because you can't always see each other with the way the rolling hills works.
Yeah.
Me thinking the situation, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, it sounds right. Like, I'll stay within 100 yards. You can yell and hear each other. And so we split up. I go down, you go up, or you stay up high. And we start gridding our way. And the thing about this is when you start gridding, you don't actually just grid one direction. You're going up, you're going down, you're looking left, you're looking right, you're constantly checking these random different logs, and the next thing you know, you're like all disorientated.
Yeah, and with it being a burn, like bears are notorious for going and curling up in a little cave or a little pocket, and with all the deadfall, there was just tons of these little areas. So it was slow and meticulous work.
Probably an hour and a half. And if you've never been in a situation where you think you wounded a bear, or you just don't know if you missed, an hour, 30 minutes seems like an eternity. And so I remember, I'm going through all this stuff, crawling on my knees, just making sure every little nook and cranny is checked. And finally, I'm like, dude, I make it to the end of where I thought we had communicated where we were going to meet up. I get over to that rock, and I'm standing on that rock. And I'm like, what? Nate should be here anytime. And so I'm just sitting there. I kind of, I stopped looking. I literally went and just stood on a rock just to sit there. And I sit there for 30 minutes, and I'm like, where's Nate? And I start yelling. I start literally, at first I was like, Nate, just casual, oh, he's probably right there. No response. And at this point, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? He should be here. And then 15 minutes later, I am at this point, because at first I was like, I don't want to scare this bear away. 15 minutes later, I'm like, I don't even care about this bear. I'm yelling at the top of my lungs, Nate, where are you? No response. And so I stayed there for another 20 minutes, and then I forgot what you were doing.
Yeah, so during this time, like he said, we split up to grid, and I was gridding, and then I think where the communication broke down initially was just we had a generalized plan. We'll meet over here in a bit, just kind of very nondescript. And so I got to where, and it's deceiving. It's deceiving because the basin was so big that we felt like the area we were in was small, when in reality the area we were in was still really big because it was a big portion of this basin. And I got to the area before Samong, and he wasn't there. I hung around for a bit, and I was like, oh, he must just be back where we took the shot from.
Mhm.
And so I gridded back, and I got back to where we had originally kind of been rendezvousing this whole morning and afternoon, is where you took the shot from across the basin, where we were kind of where you took your third shot from 10 yards down the hill. And so I sat there and I was like, well, I'm thinking the best thing to do when people get separated is like, I'm not going to move. I'm going to stay here. This is a known spot to both of us.
Mhm.
And I'm going to stay here for a little bit. And I got like half an hour went by, and I kind of started getting nervous. And then I kind of started to do the same thing. Like I started with kind of the quiet, hey, Samong,
Yeah.
and nothing. And then another half an hour went by, and I'm doing the same exact thing. I'm just yelling
Yeah.
at the top of my lungs with nothing. And we had communication. I mean, we can start breaking down our mistakes here. One of our mistakes was that Samong was using a Garmin InReach,
Mhm.
and I was using a Zoleo.
Yep.
And if those two devices are compatible together, however, to use them, you need to have your specific device number, which is like for the Zoleo, it's its own number. It's not his phone number. So I messaged his phone number, but that's not what was connected to his device.
Because my phone itself has no service. So
Correct.
Nate would have had to use his Zoleo satellite phone to text my Garmin phone number, which
Yeah.
we did not do before this hunt.
So then I was like, well, that's fine. What I'll just do is we both have messages to our family back at home that we've been sending check-ins to. I'll send a message to Marissa, my wife, and because I don't have any of Samong's family, and I'll have Marissa send Samong a Garmin message.
Uh-huh.
And I did that, and Marissa's like, I don't have Samong's Garmin number either.
Yeah.
So I realized we hadn't shared any of these kind of third-party ways to communicate with each other.
Yeah. Me and Nate have been separated, unintentionally separated, for 3 hours in the middle of nowhere, and we don't know where each other are. We can't communicate with each other. I'm like freaking out.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what happened to Nate. And
I just remember, I mean, it's a really strange feeling to where I remember this distinct shift where it went from like I'd like to find Samong, but like, let's keep gridding for this bear, to I don't care about the bear. I don't care about deer hunting. I don't care if we blow up this basin and we can't hunt here for the rest of the trip. Like, we're in really deep country. We're in country with no service except for satellite phones. And this country is like not forgiving.
Yeah.
It is like tons of rocks, little cliffs, shaly hillsides, deadfall, which deadfall's dangerous. And so at this point, I'm starting to go down the path of like, I have my handgun with me because we just took one rifle. So you had the rifle.
Yep.
I was like, in another 30 minutes, I'm going to take 3 shots
Mhm.
and then wait 30 more minutes. And then if I hear nothing, I was going to push the SOS button because
Yeah.
that's all I had left.
And so right off the bat, you can already see a lot of the mistakes we've done. But again, to give a little context, as Nate mentioned previously, we thought that we were in a small area.
Mhm.
We were not in a small area. So by the time where I had taken the shot where you ended up just kind of sitting around, and where we originally kind of discussed where we were going to meet up, that was like half a mile through like a lot of deadfall and treacherous terrain. And so I remember I'm sitting on this rock, and I'm like, at this point, like, it's not just, okay, where's Nate? Okay, that's not the question anymore. The real question is, what happened to Nate, right? It's like, I can be yelling, I could be shooting my gun, but if he's not responding, did he trip and did he fall, hit his head? Like, is he unconscious? Is something happening that, what if he's right there and he's like, I can hear you, but I can't make a sound because something's wrong with me. Like all these thoughts, like these very haunting thoughts started rolling in. And it was like my mental started going from like, okay, we just messed up on a bear. And anybody who knows me, like if you watch my videos, I hate wounding animals. I hate missing. Okay, that in and of itself will put me at like a mental low. At this point, that bear was so high up in my mental. I was like, I don't care about this bear. Like, where is Nate at? And so I remember I'm sitting on this rock and I'm looking at my phone constantly. I'm like, dude, every minute that was going by just felt so precious, right? And so I'm like, okay, what if Nate just worked his way? Because when we were gridding, when we said, oh, we're going to follow this bear, it was working in the direction towards camp. Granted, camp was like a mile and a half away. So I'm like, okay, what if Nate just kept gridding and he just went to camp and then he just ended up, he's sitting over there for me. And so I remember I look at camp because you can kind of see camp. And I'm looking at camp, I'm like, that is really far away. And I don't want to go over there just to find out that Nate's not over there and I have to come back over here. That's a wasted like 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours of just mindlessly walking. But I remember I was like, well, I guess at some point Nate's got to return to the tent, right? If he's still capable. And so I'm looking at the clock. I think it was like 12:37 or something like that, like middle of the day. And I'm like, I'm gonna go back to camp. If he's not there, I'll come back. And so I start bombing, and as I'm bombing my way back, I'm yelling I'm like, Nate, where are you? Like doing as many noises as I can, aside from shooting a gun at this point. I get back to camp. It takes me like an hour to get back to camp, and I'm up there, and I'm like, okay, I hope Nate's here. I hope Nate's here. I hope he's here.
And looking back, this was one advantage that with our camp is we picked a camp with it being at the head of the basin. There was rocks around where we had great visibility of the basin.
It was like there was all these burns, and then our camp was like in this picturesque like meadow, almost like this outcrop where like if you stood right there, like you can see. And okay, this is the other thing. Hunter orange saved us. On a high buck hunt, you're required to wear hunter orange. And so I remember I was like, I'm gonna go to camp. And I remember as I'm walking up the camp, because I'm coming from the bottom of the creek, climbing up to our camp. And I remember I'm like dying and like nervous and scared getting up to camp. I'm like, I hope Nate's there. I hope Nate's there. I get up there. Nate is not there. And I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding. At this point, dude, like I'm starting to like freak out. I'm literally starting to cuss out in my head. I'm like, what is happening, dude? Like I'm about to go home. I have to hike out of here. I have to go home. I have to tell people that Nate died on a hunt with me. Like all these, it sounds so funny.
It sounds funny now, but man, when you're out there, it's such a different.
It's not a joke.
It's such a different mentality you're in.
Yeah.
And like you said, time, we can be at home and, scroll on our phone for 3 hours and feel like nothing happened. But, 3, 4, or 5 hours out with no service when you're like waiting on edge to find somebody or for something to happen minute by minute, it feels like you're just waiting for paint to dry.
What if he does hear me? He just can't respond. That was the other question. Like, what if he tripped and he fell over? He's conscious, but he just can't move. That was the other thing, right? It's like all these thoughts start flooding your head. And I get up there, and I remember I look at our camp. I unzip Nate's tent just to make sure he wasn't sleeping in the tent. Like, you're doing everything that, even though it sounds comedic now, like, why would you do that? It's like, in the moment, you're so desperate.
And it's funny because the other thing that I never realized prior to this is I almost didn't want to do things just in case that, like the first time I was like, I didn't want to yell your name really loud because what if I yelled your name really loud and you didn't respond?
Yeah.
And like you go through 4 or 5 of these things. Like I started with like, what if I go back and he's not at our meetup spot? You weren't there. Well, what if I go back to where you shot from and he's not there? So I did it and you're not there. And what if I like yell out your name a little bit? And every one of these, that's kind of a barrier to overcome because like, what if I do this and I don't get any sort of response?
Yeah. And to touch on that, here's the other mental thing. Every time you do something that you think is going to work and it doesn't work, it backfires. Like thinking like, okay, I'm going to yell Nate's name really loud and he's going to yell back. And when you yell really loud and it's dead silent, you're like, it eats at you a little bit more. You do it again, no response, it eats at you a little bit more. And the next thing you know, you're in this pit of just like, I don't know. Like I don't know how to explain that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember, anyway, back to the story. I unzip your tent. You're not there. I unzip it. I drop my pack down. I take a drink of water, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go put my Hunter Orange, and I'm gonna go sit next to this giant white rock in front of our camp that's overlooking the basin where we just shot the bear from, and I'm just gonna splay out my orange vest as big as I can on this white rock.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I sat there, and I am just like meticulously glassing through the binos, scanning everywhere I just came from, where we shot the bear, or where the bear was, trying to pick out where Nate was, and I'm looking, and probably like 25 minutes go by. I don't pick Nate up. And at the same time, I'm kind of yelling too. Like I'm yelling from camp, but I don't think my sound even traveled that far because it was so far away. And I think at this point, like there was a little bit of breeze up top too. So like wind was essentially blocking out any communication that we could have heard. I'm glassing, and I just don't see Nate, dude. I remember just sitting there like, this is the worst day of my life.
This whole time, I was more or less staying right around, like within 50 to 100 yards of where you shot from.
And where I had shot from camp, you were just on the other side of a rolling hill.
Yeah, so like we said,
see.
it was kind of these two finger ridges that he had shot across, and we were on the back side of one of those finger ridges to get a little bit closer to where that bear was. And so finally I was like, okay, I'm going to start heading back towards camp and grit a little bit and yell my way. I crested over the ridge, and I was like, I guess I'll just glass back up at camp and see if I see anything. And I remember so distinctly pulling up my binos, and the first thing that came into my binos was your orange vest.
Yeah.
And it didn't register immediately. I'm like, I know camp's right up there.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, that seems like really purposeful. And then I like kind of scanned to the right, and I saw you sitting there. And so I pop my pack off, I take my vest off, and I just start like waving my vest in these huge circles.
And I remember I caught that movement. I was like, oh, and I look at it, and sure enough, it's Nate doing this freaking twirl with his orange vest. And so as a response, I went and grabbed mine, and I started doing the same thing to communicate to each other, like, I see you.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I think just like, again, we're like a mile and a half apart from each other. We just finally saw each other after like 4.5 hours of not seeing each other, not knowing where each other is. And I think at that point, we kind of just like, through just like looking at each other's body language, like, you're going to come back to camp.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to wait for you.
Yeah.
That feeling when I finally saw him again,
word.
I have no words to explain that. Anyways, like 30 minutes later, you show up at camp. Like, I think you were running back to camp. We get back. I think the first thing we did was we looked at each other because you were still coming up, and you stopped. I looked at it, like, the first thing I said was, "Where did you go?" Or we said something like that. And you're like, "Where did you go?" Yeah. And so it's like, we were so relieved, obviously, but at the same time, there's so many things going on. We were just like trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing we did after we hugged each other.
Yeah.
I remember we hugged. I'm like, dude, I'm so happy to see you again. I don't care about that bear anymore. Screw that bear.
It was like, that made it feel like a successful hunt.
Yeah.
More than a successful hunt. It was like, wow, we just like
we found each other.
Narrowly escaped something a really bad situation.
And it sounds like we're kind of exaggerating. Like, oh my goodness, okay, you guys were separated for like 5 hours. No big deal. But again, until you have been in that position out there, like, I don't have the words to explain it. And so I remember we looked at it. It was like 2:00 in the afternoon. I looked at Nate. I was like, dude, we're done hunting for today. Mm-hmm. So we kind of regrouped, and we went and sat at this pond, or this little. It's not even a pond. It's just like a little.
It was like
it's like a little pool.
Yeah, it was like a flow from. It was like the bottom of the ridge.
Yeah, so like there's a creek that runs through camp, and then it kind of has this small little pool. And we went and we just like took our boots off, took our socks off. We just kind of dunked our feet in there. We kind of just sat next to each other, just kind of like in shock, in awe, and just happy and
extremely tired, because this
exhausted.
Whole time, the country that we were doing all this through, like Samong said, he headed back to camp. I headed back to camp, but like going back to camp was not a trivial feat. It was maybe a mile or a mile and a half, but it was this just like treacherous, like shoulder high deadfall that pretty much every 5 yards you were having to like climb over something, like get on your hands and knees and crawl under. Like, it was a pretty brutal area to have this happen in. So we were just tuckered.
Yeah, and I think we sat at that pool and we're like, man, dude, like there's a lot of mistakes that we made on this hunt, and we're never doing that again. We didn't really hunt the rest of the day. We went back to camp, and then we kind of just glassed over again. The next day we spent the next full day trying to find that bear again. Never found that bear. Long story short, but that's really the story or the nutshell that we want to touch on. And so, in the middle of that hunt, we were like, we should think of a name for that basin, and we kind of like threw out some random names, but then Nate ultimately settled on this name.
I was like, it's got to be SOS Basin. I was about to push the SOS button.
And I was like, that name is perfect. So if you watch the title, if you looked at the title of this podcast and this YouTube video, that's the story of SOS Basin, and that's our SOS Basin. There's a lot of lessons that we took from this hunt, and we're going to try to share it with you. Just more of a list format. So we never did find the bear. I think I came back home from that hunt and I re-looked at the footage on the big screen. I never hit that bear. I don't ever think I hit that bear because the first shot where I thought I drilled him, I hit this giant branch, and this branch just goes flying off. And anybody that knows deflection on a bullet, like you're not hitting that bear because the branch was like probably like 30 yards before he got to the bear. So like that's 30 yards of the bullet could have deflected anywhere. And he didn't react like he got hit. Anybody that hits a bear, the moment they get hit, it's like they react to like a bee sting. This one, he was just kind of like nonchalant, like, oh, that was weird. And he just took off. My second shot, I know I didn't hit him because I didn't even try to hit him. My third shot, I don't even think I hit him because I was doing an offhand, like kind of adrenaline pumped shot where you're kind of shaky because you're thinking the bear's charging you. And so I never
through the bush.
So I don't ever think I hit that bear ever, which is kind of a good thing. But that's the story of SOS Basin.
Yeah.
We ended up seeing 30 deer the next day or 2 days over, but we never found anything. So with that said, let's walk down what we did wrong and why we're never going to do that again.
Kind of starting, I think the umbrella theme of this is when you're hunting with a partner. We had, because this was our first time really experiencing this, we had not made any sort of formal plan. And so that's the umbrella theme is make a plan and make it specific, like specific times, specific locations, and make kind of like a list if things don't go the right way, like how you deal with that situation.
It sounds so basic, but you got to plan for the worst.
Yeah.
Right? It's so easy to go on a hunt thinking like the worst is not going to happen to us. Like we'll be all right. And that mindset is kind of what bit us. We're thinking we can't be separated. Like nothing's going to happen to us. And it did. And so just to touch on what you said, it's like you got to have a plan for essentially every possibility. Like if this is what's happening, you need to have a plan. Like this is what I'm going to do, because it's very easy to, when you're sitting next to your partner, to be like, oh yeah, we can kind of briefly do it like this. But when it gets to the nitty gritty of it, every detail matters.
Yeah.
To say that, oh, we'll just go meet at that rock over there. That's not the same as no, we're going to meet at that rock right there, that big one right there. That's not the same as, okay, let's just go meet somewhere over there.
Yeah.
You know? And so like that, because we kind of said that.
Or with the beauty of Onyx nowadays, you can literally share a pin, which is an exact GPS coordinate, and say, at this pin, we're going to meet in 1 hour from now, which is 1 p.m.
Wrong.
And this doesn't even go for like something where you're purposely separated, like gridding. But for instance, having a general plan in place. For instance, if I get up before Samong in the morning to glass, and say I saw an animal that was on the move and I needed to take a move, he thinks he's going to get up and I'm going to be sitting there glassing, and then he gets up and I ended up being on a 6 or 7 hour stalk on an animal.
Yeah.
The same exact situation could play out where I'm actually trying to have a successful hunt and he thinks that I'm lost, and it's the exact same thing. So it's not only when you're purposefully separating, but all those little times in between a hunt when you're kind of going and doing your own thing.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing that we want to share. The second one is your contacts. Whoever you're hunting with, make sure that everybody, so for example, to make it easy, Nate and me and our family, we'll take that as 4 groups. Myself is one, Nate's the other, Marissa, for example, like Nate's family is the other one. My family is the other one. Make sure that not only do I have, Nate and I have our immediate contact, make sure that Marissa or Nate's family also has mine, and I also have Marissa's, and Marissa also has my family.
Mhm.
Every single person involved should have each other's contact.
In healthcare, we call it closed loop communication, and it's this idea that like you say something and you say it to a team and the team repeats it back to you, and it closes the loop, making sure that everybody knows what's going on. It's the exact same thing with hunting.
Yeah.
Like everybody, there should be no direction that kind of has an empty line between it with who's able to communicate with each other.
Yeah, because it's like in this situation, I didn't have communication with Marissa. She didn't have communication with me. You didn't have communication with my family. We had communication to each other, even though we technically didn't. We just thought, oh, we're going to be next to each other. Fine. But in the moment, that's when we figured out I can't even talk to you. You can't even talk to me. You can talk to Marissa, but Marissa can't even talk to me. So neither of you even know what's going on with me. My family will know what's going on with me because I can communicate with them. But it's like there's a disconnect between these parties, and that's not good because nobody's on the same page. So that's the other thing. Whoever you're going hunting with, or I guess just out and about, not even hunting, always have not only your partner's contacts, but also their emergency contacts, and make sure that emergency contacts also have you as well as your own emergency contacts. That's something that would have really helped in that situation.
Yeah, there's a couple things we could have done to completely make this whole situation irrelevant. A couple simple things, and we just didn't do them, and we learned.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what has to happen, but hopefully hopefully multiple times throughout these podcasts, that will help you learn something so you don't have to go through it yourself.
Yep. Yeah, and so speaking of that, I guess quickly touching on satellite phones. So a lot of times when Nate and we hunt, we don't have cell phone service. Nate uses a Zoleo, which is a satellite phone. I use a Zoleo now. I was using the Garmin InReach on that hunt. The reason why I switched over to a Zoleo is because I prefer the interface. The other advantage of that is that the fact that you use a Zoleo and I use a Zoleo, you're sharing the same interface. There's one less obstacle for you to go through because Zoleo can text Zoleo right away. And I always know my phone number because Zoleo shows it. But to go from a Garmin InReach to communicate to a Zoleo and vice versa, it can kind of have a barrier of entry there. That's the other one. If you can share one single type of satellite phone, do it.
Yeah.
I like the Zoleo. I can't recommend the Zoleo enough. I recommend that over the Garmin InReach. But again, use what works for you and use what you know is reliable and try. I'm not going to say you have to use the same. If you're not going to use the same, just do the homework that we did not do.
Yeah, just share your numbers ahead of time. Make a plan. Test it out. See if it works at home in service before you're out of service. You don't have to wait for out of service to test those kind of devices out. So,
yeah, the next point, or I guess the next lesson, is at the core of it, this is kind of where we started doing things right. We did a lot of wrong, but these are some things we did right. The other thing, too, is that when you are truly lost like that, again, everything could have gone complete array. For example, if something actually happened to Nate, me going back to camp and putting my orange vest on a rock would have been pointless because you would have never showed up. You would have been, whatever happened to you, you would have never seen it. But in this case, it worked out because we were both fine. We just lost each other. This is what I did do right in that situation is I went back to a point where we know that is a spot we were at some point, or that we have to return to at some point, right? Our camp was there. Our sleeping bags were there. That's where we're going to camp out. And so that's what I did. I said, Nate's got to come back here at some point if he's okay. If he doesn't show up here by nightfall, that's when the SOS is going off because he's not showing up, right? And so you kind of had to give it time in a way, even though in those situations, like time can really be everything. And so I went up there. And the other thing too is like have something vibrant. We have a rock. I put my orange vest as wide as I can. And not only that, I sat next to it. To put an orange vest over a rock, but you're off somewhere where Nate can't even see, that's pointless because you can't even connect to each other. So like wherever your beacon is, sit next to it, right? And then the other thing that we did do right is the moment we saw each other again after like 5 hours, we made it clear that we saw each other. You were waving your vest like, okay, I saw you. And I did the same thing to repeat what you were doing to make sure that, okay, I know that he saw me and you know that I saw you, right? And so it's like you have this clear communication because once you do that, then at that point, it's still kind of hard, but in this situation, I was at camp. It made no sense for me to move. You were going to come back to camp. And so that's what happened. I stayed there. You showed up. Because in this situation, some people will be like, oh my goodness, there's him. Like, I'm going to run over there and meet him halfway. And then you put yourself in another predicament that's not even good.
Exactly.
Right. So even though we did a lot wrong, we did do some right as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, I think that's exactly what you're saying. You know, there's some common sense that we had that we were lucky to have. We made some mistakes, and we learned some lessons.
Yeah, we did. And so that right there is the story of SOS Basin. Those are some of the lessons that we've learned. And I'm pretty proud to say we have never had something like that happen again ever since that moment.
Absolutely.
We learned the lesson the hard way. But that's something that we wanted to share because we feel like that's something that is often overlooked, and it's kind of just always lurking right behind you. Like, one thing you're together, next thing you know, you're like, I have no idea where my partner is.
Yeah.
That's the story we wanted to share, and we just figured it'd be a good opener podcast.
For sure.
To share a story where we probably were truthfully scared.
We've talked. I mean, you see a tiny bit about it in the video. You wouldn't really know. We've talked about it a little bit in the past. But we've never dove in depth to it before.
If you go back and you watch our 2022 high buck hunt, it's a 2-part series. This story that we just told you is kind of just overshadowed.
It happens in the interim, more or less, between the first part and the second part, actually.
Why is there no in-between in filming this? Because I didn't care about filming at that point. I was like, where is Nate? And so at that point, that's another thing is like, I love to film. We love to hunt. But when it comes to everything, like when everything's on the line, you really see what matters. That bear, I could not care less about whether we got it or not. My camera and my filming, I could not care if I got a 2-part series or not. I just wanted to know if Nate was okay, right? And so it's like when it's easy to like, oh yeah, we're gonna have fun, but just always have your priorities listed out. And so that's a little bit of a introduction to this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. It's a story that we have yet to share, honestly. We haven't shared with anybody. It's kind of been a between me and Nate kind of deal because part of it is kind of embarrassing to tell, but at the same time, I think it's a really entertaining story and also a very educational story.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we wanted to start with that story and just kind of get you guys excited about the podcast because we truly are. Like, we're pumped.
We're stoked to get it going.
To have this podcast and to be able to share behind the scenes, kind of like what we just did here, give you guys the lessons, give you guys the context, and just a little bit behind the scenes as to what happens outside and also in our daily life. You know, occasionally when we do a podcast, we'll just kind of ask each other how life has been. And you guys can catch up with us on a more timely basis, if you will. We're going to do weekly episodes of this podcast. So every week you can expect to have a new episode, and we're really going to cover all sorts of different topics, and we're going to try our best to stick with the season at hand. So if we're approaching turkey season, we're going to talk turkeys. In this case, the next thing that's coming up is fall bear. So after this podcast is over, you can expect a lot of fall bear, roll into September, do that good thing, and then follow through the months and follow through the seasons, and that's where we end up.
That's the goal.
That's to go. We are so happy to have you guys here. We're so stoked that we get to do this.
But before, we have to do Trivia Duel.
That's right. Before we go, we're going to do Trivia Duel. Nate mentioned this at the beginning of the show. And how this is going to happen is every week, every podcast, every week, we're going to play the games, right? Trivia Duel and Fast Facts. We already done Fast Facts. Now we're going to do Trivia Duel, where I ask Nate a question, and he has to answer it, and he does the same thing. And we don't really know. We kind of want it to be a game, but for now, I think we'll just kind of, you get brownie points today. I get brownie points today.
Works for me.
We'll get a score board of some kind going in the future, and we'll add punishments and rewards in the future. But as of right now, just trying to get things off the ground, we're just going to have fun here.
I like it.
So, do you want to go first, or do I want to go first?
Why don't you go first?
You want me to ask you the question?
I want you to ask me the question.
Okay. I guess I have one question. I'll ask you this question because you shoot a 308. Nate owns 2 308 rifles. I own one. So this is the question, or the context and then the question. The 308 Winchester is one of the most popular hunting cartridges in the world. At the core, the 308 is based on a shortened 30-06 Springfield case. The purpose of this was to create a shorter military cartridge for both semi and fully automatic weapons. In what year did Winchester introduce the 308 Winchester? And I'll give you multiple choice. So these are your 4 answers. 1963,
Okay.
1954, 1952, and 1949.
Those are some pretty tight date ranges. I'm gonna say my gut feeling was 54, so I'm gonna lock in with 1954. But I honestly do not know.
The year that Winchester introduced the .308 Winchester was 1952.
Oh, so close.
So close.
2 years off.
2 years off.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, 1952 is when they released the .308 Winchester.
Now I'm a real 308 hunter
Now
because I
you are.
know when it came out.
Because you know the background of when it was introduced.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so this is based off of 2023 polling and research done by both WDFW biologists and hunter reporting. The Washington deer population was estimated at 276,000. Okay?
Okay.
That is split up between black-tailed mule deer and white-tailed deer. What percentage, I'm just going to pick one of these for you. What percentage of the state is black-tailed deer?
So out of 276,000,
Correct.
how many of those are blacktails in percentage-wise?
Correct.
So you're telling me I have a 1 in 100 chance.
You have a 1 in 100 chance. I'm not going to go multiple choice. I could have. That would have been nicer.
I would have, if I had to guess, I'm going to say 37%.
Oh, you're very close, actually. So their research showed that 41% of the state's deer population are blacktail.
Wow.
In addition to that, 33% are mule deer and 23.5%, roughly, these all I rounded, 23.5% are whitetail.
Wow. Okay, first off, I'm very shocked that I got that close.
Yeah, you got very close.
But that is crazy that blacktails dominate our
there
deer
are
population.
almost twice as many blacktails in Washington as there are whitetails, which I grew up in Snohomish. I grew up on the west side of Washington, and as we have figured out in the last couple of years hunting blacktails in Oregon, they are ghosts.
Yeah.
And the amount of deer I see in eastern Washington on the daily driving versus blacktails growing up for 15 years is just not in comparison.
So 41% blacktail, 33% mule deer, 23.5% for whitetail.
Correct.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
There you go, folks.
There's your trivia duel for the day.
I hope you guys learned something. The .308 was introduced in 1952, and blacktails dominate, or they are the most populated deer species in Washington at 41% of 276,000 deer.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a little bit of a sneak peek into what's to come on the podcast. We're here to educate each other, have fun, and really just share our experiences on what we've learned over the past.
We look forward to seeing you guys next week with the second episode of the Samong Outdoors Podcast.
We're stoked to be here. We're happy to have you guys here. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.